Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 820, 820, Monday, June the 24th, 2019. Thank you so much for tuning in. Okay, so of course we're going to get to the dumbass of the week. Thanks Patty for the tip on how to make sure I get all the comments in there. I kind of did what you said, and yeah, I think I actually did get a larger vote total than I normally get, so that may solve our problem. Thank you. Okay, so yesterday I was just thinking, we've had Barr around for a while, and of course our number one focus here on TowerGate is to follow the Spygate story. It's the main thing that we want to do here. Obviously, we don't always have enough news to fill up 30 minutes, so I talk about other things as well. But the primary focus of all my TowerGate videos is always to hit the stuff relating to Spygate first and foremost. But I was thinking yesterday, with Durham, I mean, the guy just he clamps it tight. He doesn't let anything out. So we don't get a lot of information. It doesn't seem like about what's going on with Durham's investigation, or Barr and Durham's investigation, I guess you would say. So I thought I would just go back and just kind of compile everything I could to learn as much as we can about where we are now in the investigation since AG Barr has become the Attorney General. And I went back to just put together the bits and pieces of things so I could compile it and go through them just so we get an idea of exactly what we do know about what has happened since Barr has become Attorney General in regards to the Spygate investigation. And my primary sources for this are the same sources I mention all the time for the most part, but specifically about what's going on with Barr and Durham rely heavily on certain people, obviously Joe DeGeneva and his wife, because they've known Barr personally for over 30 years. They're both former DOJ attorneys. Obviously they have a law firm and they do a lot of work for DC clients. They're very plugged into the DC community. They have a lot of contacts for many, many years inside the DOJ. I don't know if DeGeneva talks to Barr personally. He never really discloses that. But you get the feeling he talks to someone, maybe Barr himself, someone very close to Barr. He seems to know quite a bit about Durham. I also like CDN.com. That's the community digital, the community digital news. I just use them as CDN so much that I don't even know what they stand for anymore. But yeah, community digital news, CDN.com. And they do a lot of stories. I think DeGeneva might be a contributor there. Lee Smith, I think, is a contributor there. And they follow a lot of things having to do with legal or judicial issues going on in and around D.C. So that is a very good source for finding out what may be going on with Barr and Durham. Obviously, Lee Smith, Paul Sperry, obviously plugged into D.C. He's pretty much of a think tanker, and he's plugged into a lot of people. And of course John Solomon here and there. So just various bits and pieces of information that I've been able to accumulate, trying to find out everything we can about what has gone on since Barr has become Attorney General and relating to the Spygate scandal. And I was kind of surprised when I went through and put the list together and then went back and looked at it that we just been getting this stuff in little bits and pieces, but when you put it all together, you can see that this investigation is really moving and it's really serious and it's really going, I think, in the right direction. So let's just cover some of the things that we have learned, despite the fact that Durham keeps a very tight wrap on leaks. So you don't have leaks coming out of his investigation. So he's obviously very good at that. So let's take a little review of what we have learned since Barr has become Attorney General in regards to Spygate. Okay, so we have learned that John Durham has already used a grand jury in the probe of Comey, Strzok, and McCabe, as well as James Baker. James Baker, he was originally given that first. That was about 9 months ago. And that would have been in October of 2018 is when he was given the General Counsel James Baker inquiry, and that led him into looking into Comey, Strzok, and McCabe. Comey, Strzok, McCabe, and Baker are the primary focus of Durham since October 2018, and we know that he has already used a grand jury, and we believe that that was in Connecticut at the time. Now we know that Barr has moved him to D.C., and that probably has a lot to do with the fact that Barr wants him closer so that they can have regular face-to-face meetings. We know that Obama was a principal in the coup plot, and we know that from many different sources. I will not go through them all, but we know there's 2 or 3 different texts between Page and Strzok which tell us that Obama is running the show. The White House wants to know everything. We, of course, have just recently learned that Obama set up his own task force on August the 6th of 2016 to take over, essentially, the investigation. There's other evidence out there that tells us that we can be about 90% certain at this point that Obama was a principal in the coup plot and knew everything that was going on and was in fact one of the principals running it. We have learned that Hillary did conspire with John Brennan and likely Comey and Clapper as well. We have learned that this entire thing was about a coup. We have learned that the same individuals, FBI individuals, who were part of the effort to stop Trump during the 2016 election, were the same people that were put onto the Mueller team. Those 40 FBI agents, the same ones who were involved in the 2016 shenanigans, are the very same FBI agents that got put onto the Mueller probe. And that would include the 2 heaviest players, Strzok and Weissman. And of course, Strzok and Weissman were 2 of the primaries behind the illegal FISAs. And of course, we didn't learn this. We knew about Strzok, but we didn't know about Weissman until about 6 months ago, exactly how deeply he was involved with Strzok and how early on he was looking at the dossier all the way back in the summer of 2016. And so we know that Strzok and Weissman both go back a long way together in the plot and were largely the 2 that were pushing the FISA. We now know that Sidney Blumenthal, Hillary's fixer, made regular forays to the John Kerry State Department to help create and spread the veracity of the Steele dossier using the Shearer dossier material. And it was Blumenthal that the FBI used to vouch for the veracity of the Steele material in the first FISA application. And that's what we've recently learned. That was the other part that Devin Nunes kept going on, Maria Bartiromo not being able to talk about the other thing besides the Steele dossier that was responsible for starting the investigation. He wasn't able to talk about it, but of course we've just recently learned by putting 2 and 2 together from recent information that came out that in fact the other source and the other piece of information was the Shearer dossier, and it was delivered to them by Sidney Blumenthal. He was Hillary's fixer, and he was a lot more involved. And of course, we're learning that he made regular trips over to the State Department to intermingle with people there, and John Kerry was aware of every bit of it. We've learned that James Clapper is likely the person who unmasked and likely leaked the Flynn intercepts. We have learned that the Obama administration used the NSA's PRISM system to conduct surveillance since at least 2012. We learned, of course, about the private contractors that Attorney General Barr and Durham are now looking at. The ones who are doing the 702 queries, 85% of them illegal. These 702 queries, we know that they were done going back all the way to 2012, and they included 702 queries on people like Mitt Romney, Paul Ryan, Donald Trump, John Roberts, the Supreme Court Justice, Anton Scalia, and journalist Michael Hastings. Remember him? his Mercedes blew up just as he was about to break a major story that would have been damaging to the military-industrial complex. He was one of the people whose names came up in one of those 702 queries. We are now learning that the results of those 702 queries were being sent to Brennan, Mr. Potato Head, and Clapper, the unwitting idiot James Clapper. Durham has already impaneled a grand jury. That was in Connecticut. There may be another one in D.C., but we know the one in Connecticut, that the 3 masked contractors, the ones whose names are blacked out in the document we all saw released about a year and a half ago, that the contractors have been interviewed and have likely spilled their guts. We are learning that Mueller, this is a speculation, we're learning that Mueller himself may now become a target of Durham's investigation. We are hearing that Lisa Page has suspected that Lisa Page and Bruce Orr are cooperating with Durham. We just learned a couple of weeks ago that Steele has reached a deal, Christopher Steele has reached a deal to talk to Durham, or his investigators. So these are just some of the things that we have learned, and it shows us where this investigation is going. Still not a lot of great details. Some of those things we knew, some of them things we suspected, some of them things are now being talked about fairly openly as being true or are happening now or have happened within the last few months since Barr has been the Attorney General. There's also this story out there, it's been floating out there for about a week, about this so-called red team in relation to A.G. Barr and getting to the origins of the Spygate thing. So I'm not sure where this comes from. I'm thinking it may be a Q thing. I don't know. But it's basically focused on Barr putting together something called a red team to look into the origins of Spygate. So there was a little confusion at first when Barr talked about going back to the origins. It wasn't really clear if he was talking about the investigation, the origins of the investigation, or the origins of the overall Russia collusion hoax. So it looks like we're learning now that he was talking about the origins of the Russia hoax itself. Where did that come from? And of course we know that early on it came, as far as on the political side, from the DNC Hillary Clinton campaign. That was coming from Ukraine via Alexandra Chalupa and Confusion GPS being in contact with corrupt Ukrainian officials. And it began with Manafort. And then when Manafort joined the Trump campaign, that tied Trump into the Manafort theory that he was coordinating with the Russians or what have you. And then on the law enforcement side, of course, it all started pretty much with the allegation that the Russians hacked the DNC servers, and that was political as well. So there's two different things there, really: the origin of the sort of Russia narrative and the origin of the investigations. And so Barr, and this is what this red team is referring to, going into the origins, I think that that's what it appears that that's what they're talking about. And we've heard recent news reports just in the last week that that is in fact what Durham is looking at, is the actual origins of where did this Russia narrative originate. And that will take him to Ukraine, and it will take him back to the original claim by the DNC that the Russians hacked the DNC servers. And so that's the origins of that. And then, of course, that'll lead you into the investigation. So, yes, they were talking about the Russian narrative origin. That's what he meant when he said go back to the origin. He wasn't talking about the origin of the investigation, Crossfire Hurricane, which is said to have began on, well, it did begin on July 31st, 2016, but that was not the beginning of the activities. We know those things were going on back in the fall of 2015, long before July 31st of 2016. So it appears that when they're talking about the origins, they're talking about the origins of the Russia-Trump collusion itself. And of course, you got to go back to the DNC hack, and of course, the stuff coming out of Ukraine and late 2015 via this DNC operative Alexandra Chalupa and Fusion GPS, both getting information directly from the corrupt Ukrainians. So there's kind of a combination of things. That's where the origins of the Trump-Russia collusion things start, and from there that leads to all the other things that occurred. So that's quite a bit that we have learned, and most of this is sourced pretty well, and I think we'll find out that most of this, if not all of it, will pan out to be true, and we'll just have to wait and see, because again, Durham and Barr really run a pretty tight ship. They don't really do a lot of leaking. So anyway, that tells us a lot. Tells us that they are serious about getting to the bottom of it, and they definitely understand where you need to go to root this all out. And so I think that we're in good hands. We just have to try to find some patience. So let's cover some things that happened yesterday. Of course, many of you saw Maria Bartiromo, I'm sure. Both Nunes and Trey Gowdy were on. And Nunes, well, I'm starting to think Nunes is watching my videos. Because for the longest time, I would come on my TowerGate videos and say there were no Russians. And when I say Russians, I mean there were no Russians part of the Putin government who were involved in anything, and not Russians who are part of the establishment of Russia that's active now. Yes, there were Russians who are Russians by the fact that they're born Russians, but they're intelligence assets, they're international type guys like Deripaska and Milian and all these guys. Yeah, they're Russians, but they're not in any way connected to Putin, his government, his intelligence, or anything like that. These people are people who live in the United States or Europe. They're not tied into the Putin government in any way, shape, or form. They don't know anything about anything. They're mainly operatives for either the Democratic Party or the FBI or their sources or informants or something. They're not actual Putin inside Russians. They are other types of Russians, right? So that's what I've been talking about for the longest time. And finally, a couple of weeks ago, Nunes came out and told Maria Bartiromo there were no Russians. So I thought, hey, maybe he's watching my videos. So yesterday, I'm talking about the fact that there were two parallel tracks. And I haven't heard too many people using this, way to explain things. But I said there's two parallel tracks that you have to look at. So here we are. Yesterday on Sunday morning, Nunes is on with Maria Bartiromo, and he starts talking about how they have to understand the two parallel tracks. And he laid out almost exactly what I did on my video. So I don't know. Maybe Devin Nunes watches my videos. I don't know. But anyway, yes, parallel tracks, and I explained it in my video yesterday. Nunes understands this. I'm sure Barr and Durham understands it. What you obviously have is two parallel tracks. It's pretty easy to see. You have the political one and the law enforcement one, but you have essentially the same information, one coming from political operations, another coming from law enforcement operations. They're one and the same. They use the same sources. They have the same story. Clearly, they are working in unison and parallel to one another. The question is, how close is the coordination? Who are the people who are the point men to communicate between the two? And how was this done overall to run this coordinated operation? So that's what they'll obviously be looking into, and I'm sure they are. We learned from Nunes that they sent Christopher No Shit Sherlock Ray a letter, a final warning letter that if he doesn't produce the documents that they want, that he may find himself being criminal referral number 9. They're certainly going to make a criminal referral to whoever it is at the FBI that did not produce these documents, because he's talking about some documents that have recently come to light that should have been, that were subpoenaed or requested by the House Intelligence Committee back in 2017, and they weren't forthcoming, and now those things are coming out. There's things that should have been given to this committee a long time ago, and so Nunes is basically getting ready to bring a little more heat on Christopher No Shit Sherlock Ray, and he may do a criminal referral. Obviously he wants the remaining documents. He says he thinks they're there, that they've never received. But he's also ticked off about the fact that the things that are coming out now are things we should have had a long time ago. And he is basically, if he doesn't get the response he wants from Christopher No Shit Sherlock Ray by this coming Friday, he's going to make a criminal referral to whoever it was at the FBI that was blocking or withholding this information. Then we get Trey Gowdy, who tells Maria Bartiromo that the FBI was giving a different intelligence briefing to the two political candidates. Hillary and Trump were not getting the same briefing. Now, that's something I speculated on a while back when we were talking about the fact that they were getting these briefings, and why wasn't Trump briefed on all this? And I said a long time ago, just like I said, I don't think that Brennan gave the Gang of Eight guys all the same. I don't think he told Nunes the same thing he told Schiff. So I think there was a lot of this going on with the intelligence community and the FBI not consistently giving information to both sides. Republicans and people who supported Trump were getting told one thing. Trump team, Trump himself being told one thing. Hillary Clinton and her peeps being told something else. So apparently, I didn't know this, but apparently there are documents that describe what happened in the briefing, what was disclosed in the briefings. I didn't know that there was documents on that, although I should have assumed there was. But apparently, Trey Gowdy has seen those documents, which show exactly what Trump and Clinton were being briefed on during the campaign. And he's telling Maria Bartiromo that the briefings that Trump and Clinton were getting were different. That's important. And it's something we talked about again. That's a biggie. That's something you would have to explain. And that's probably going to be the hardest thing, I think, one of the very hardest things for the deep state to explain when we finally get to that point, when they finally get these people in front of a grand jury, and you get Strzok and Page and Comey, specifically Strzok, McCabe, and Comey, because Strzok, I guess, was in charge of giving the briefings, McCabe and Comey, because they would have known, of course, FBI director and assistant director, they would have been involved in those briefings, knowing what's going down with those briefings and things and such. And that's going to be I think one of the hardest questions that they're going to have to answer is why, when they were briefing Trump during 2016, did they not inform him that the Russians may have been trying to make a play for people on his campaign team? That is something absolutely that he should have been told about, but he was not. And I think that is going to be very, very, one of the hardest things that they're going to have to overcome is why didn't they, I just don't know what a good answer is for that. I really don't. And you have to be careful with the answer they give, because the answer they give could incriminate. Like Comey and McCabe, both saying that Trump was not under investigation at that time. So if he wasn't under investigation at that time, they can't say that the reason they didn't brief him was because he was a subject of the investigation or a target of the investigation, which at that time they both have made public statements that he was not. So they either lied under oath in front of Congress. Comey would have lied 3 times to Trump's face, which we know he already did anyway. So they're in a very difficult position because of things they've already said. They can't change their tune. Just like Christopher Steele, when he gets interviewed by Durham, he can't change his tune. He's already been involved in 2 civil suits. In those depositions, he's already said certain things. He can't change his tune on them. And that's why we know his testimony is going to be so devastating to FBI officials, because Christopher Steele is basically going to have to say, hey, I told him this stuff was not verified. I told him it may or may not be true. And but yet their entire case in using Steele as a source is that he was a reliable witness. And if in fact he's a reliable witness, and the reliable witness told them that he couldn't verify the information he was giving them, but then they went to a FISA court, they launched investigations and all sorts of things based on that, they're stuck. I mean, you can't have it both ways. Either he and his information was good or it wasn't. And he himself was telling them that the information was not proven to be true. It was raw intelligence is what the term he used. So we can see that there's going to be a lot of this going on when they find themselves in front of a grand jury trying to answer these questions. They're really stuck. They're stuck because they're lying. And that's what happens when you lie, and then you try to cover it up with another lie. You find yourself in a pinch, and pretty soon your lies catch up to you. And that's why, as I say, when these people are under oath in front of a grand jury, Mr. Durham's job will be a relatively simple one. It will be just simply to ask the question and then remind them of what they've already stated at this point. And their answer will either A, incriminate them for what they did, or B, in their attempt to lie themselves out of it, they will incriminate themselves in having lied from a previous statement. So they're in deep shit, you might say. Now, let's get to Dumbass of the Week. Yes, we have quite the list of people this week. I think we got you all. Okay. Internet privacy advocate, he went with the people that don't realize that LBJ was involved in the JFK assassination. Okay, so that's going pretty much off the beaten path here. But yeah, I think that I would agree, anyone who doesn't realize at this point that LBJ was certainly part of the JFK plot, yeah, you'd have to be probably a dumbass. I think the evidence of that is overwhelming and has been for many years. Let's see, Gitmo. Gitmo went with Nadler, although he likes the dirtbag of the week. So he would call Nadler the dirtbag of the week. And, of course, that's for his interaction with Hope Hicks. Of course, describing her, calling her Mrs. Lewandowski. And, of course, I guess he says using the term blackmailing. I'm not sure what the blackmail would be, but Hope Hicks, Jerry Nadler, referring to her as Mrs. Lewandowski, and of course she corrected him every time. Youngblood, going with Mr. Potato Head, John Brennan, Obama, and of course Pelosi Schumer. Chuck and Nancy's high five. Dennis Waddell, he's going with Liawatha, Elizabeth Warren, of course Nervous Nancy, and Chuck the Shuck. Good picks there, Dennis. Patty is going with the Penguin. Little Jerry Nadler. Little Jerry waddling down the hall. Yes, he's quite the humorous looking little. He's like rotund, man. He's like the rotund guy. He's round. Walks like this. His belly is like this. Guy's got a belly on him, man. Whew, goodness. So yes, Patty going with little Jerry Nadler. We have Jenny going with AOC, Nancy and Chuck. Let's see. Someone else picked Chuck and Nancy. I just forgot to write your name down. I'm very sorry. If one person gets missed, you'll know who you are. But your pick was Chuck and Nancy. And so I just forgot to write down your name. I'm sorry. Then, of course, we have Johnny Fivefinger. And he went with John Bolton. That's always a good pick. John Bolton, yep. Let's see. He's over in Israel now talking to Netanyahu, trying to explain why he couldn't deliver on the goods, on the war. Let's see. We have Gordon. He went with Obama and Kerry. Yeah, that's a very solid pick for Gordon. Michael Vaughn, he's going with Chuck and Nancy. Lots of people going with Chuck and Nancy. Roy C., he went with AOC, the wild-eyed commie. She's quadrupled down now on her statements. She has not yet figured out that all those Jews and various other folks in Germany did not arrive in large caravans to be thrown into ovens. She hasn't figured that one out yet. Let's see. We have Douglas, who's going with Weissman, Schumer, and Fox. And I believe he's talking about the prosecutor, Kimberly Fox, who's now under investigation. Thank you, Douglas. We have Alan going with Jerry Nadler, the Penguin. We have Amy. She's going with AOC, the wild-eyed commie, Nancy and Chuck, and Nadler. Well, there's three very, very strong picks, Amy. Hard to go wrong with AOC, Nancy and Chuck, and Nadler. One of those three you just know is going to win. Dennis Shaw, he went with Nadler, the Penguin. JC, he went with Chuck and Nancy. Robin says she's going with Mueller for the lying about the putting the black ledger in there and knowing good and well it was lies and thinking he was going to get away with it. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of things that they put in there, Robin, that I'm surprised that they put in there. I mean, they've got in the Mueller report, it says that Papadopoulos approached Misfid, and that Misfid is a Russian agent. Yeah, he put that in there too. That's going to get blown up as well. Thanks so much, Robin. Let's see. Mark, he went with Nadler. T.W. Wintex went with Nancy and Chuck. Joe went with Iran's leader, Khamenei. Yeah, he's pretty much a dumbass. I'd have to go along with that one. Freddie Freddie went with Chuck and Nancy. We have Chevy Van. He's going with whatever Patty said, because Patty's usually right. And Patty went with the Penguin. So I guess that means Chevy Van is going with the Penguin, Jerry Nadler. We have Paul, who's going with Kate Brown, the Oregon governor, who's, of course, got the cops out searching for all these Republicans who won't come back to vote on this. I think it's a cap and trade bill or something. And so they left the state so they didn't have to vote. And that's a pretty funny thing going on out there, although I don't think we even talked about that on my videos. But well done, Paul, for keeping up on that. We have Gene going with Kevin McAleenan. And, of course, he's under fire right now for supposedly working for the other team, obstructing the entire thing, possibly giving out information about ICE raids. If that's the situation and that turns out to be true, I would think that he will not last the rest of the week. I think that's claims being made by Tom Homan, who's about to become the czar, I think. Let's see. Also, Gene is going with AOC and Jean Carroll. Of course, Jean Carroll being the latest nut to come out with allegations against the president, which are bogus, and we all know that. She's connected to a bunch of Democrats who hate Trump. We have Peter going with AOC, Barry, and de Blasio. Well done, Peter. Mona Lisa going with Warren. And Warren's saying that she wants reparations for the gays and lesbians and all those people for not being able to get tax credits over the years. That's kind of crazy. We have Miss Tree going with the Penguin, and Hope Hicks, or not Hope Hicks herself, but Hope Hicks being called Mrs. Lewandowski, so that would be on Nadler. That's why she's picking Nadler. Joey's going with Chuck and Nancy. Sherman, he's going with Chuck and Nancy. Jeanette is going with Jean Carroll, Buttigieg, and Chuck and Nancy. Aerolil 1 is going with Schumer, is the creep of the week. Jamie is going with Chuck and Nancy. Keith is going with Chucky. Lee is going with Jerry Nadler, the Penguin. Rocky's going with anyone who moved chess pieces during the attack. I guess he's talking about the Iran situation. People who may have been involved, may have known something, who may have been a part of something like that. They could certainly be the dumbasses. And, of course, Japan. Well done, Rocky, for pointing that out. We have Jay Brown going with AOC and Madonna. Yes, of course, Madonna. She's back, unfortunately. We have Hey Hey. Yes, we got your vote in this week, Hey Hey. John Brennan, Mr. Potato Head. Jonathan, he's going with AOC, Mr. Potato Head, and Schiff. Then we have Larry Rydell. He's going with the Penguin, Jerry Nadler. We have Larry Lyons, the talented musician. Check out his videos. Some really awesome musical stuff going on there with Larry. And he's going with John Kerry, who, by the way, served in Vietnam. We have Walker on the Hill, going with Crying Chuck, Nancy, and fat ass Jerry Nadler. Make that nervous Nancy and fat ass Jerry Nadler. Yep, he's fat in the ass and he's got a big old belly on him too. Giovanni going with Chuck and Nancy. Sane environmentalist going with AOC, the wild-eyed commie. Can never go wrong with AOC. And of course, we have going for a-hole of the week. We have John R. and he likes AOC. Gillibrand, and of course the Mockingbird Media. Okay, well hopefully I got everybody's vote in there. I did miss one name, but I got your vote. If your name wasn't called, that's probably you. Hopefully I got your vote right. Okay, so I think it's pretty obvious. It wasn't all that close this week. We have number one winning by a pretty large margin. Chuck and Nancy for that little fist pump outside the White House after they met with Trump, thinking they were going to goad him into a war in Iran, which would certainly become a big problem, and we now believe there was probably a big plot behind that. So Chuck and Nancy will get the award for Dumbass of the Week, placing first. Coming in number 2, we have, of course, the Penguin, Jerry Nadler, and bringing up the rear, we have number 3, the wild-eyed commie, AOC. Thanks so much for tuning in and for contributing to the Dumbass of the Week. We'll be back tomorrow with more TowerGate. See ya. Bye.